Well, I think it's good considering the state of the industry right now and the state of the nation, as much as possible that we can showcase opportunities here and look for more investors and focus on key issues within the oil and gas industry. It's good. For development agencies like us, who are not exactly the main core in the Niger Delta, in the oil and gas, but who operate in the same region where all these companies are operating, it'd be nice for us to also be able to listen to some of the things that are being showcased. We are here also to be able to build partnerships because as our name goes and the nature of how we do things, it's all about partnerships. And though our root lies with one of the oil and gas companies, the opportunities that avail will benefit all of them collectively. And so the more they can pay attention to some of these other deeper social issues, the better for us. So we're always out there looking for opportunities and to see how best we can continue to add value.
Speak to the work that you do on building peace and economic development in that region.
Okay, so we were set up in 2010. And the whole idea was to foster good partnerships to build economic development and reduce poverty and build economic development, and then mitigate, reduce conflict and engender peace for an enabling environment for the Niger Delta to thrive. The Niger Delta, by its vantage position, is where most of all the oil exploration is being done. So it's a major focus area for the nation and for the global economy as well. But it has been beset by a myriad of issues and problems and challenges that, if not addressed, could upset things. And so we were set up to look at things on a wider scale than even our primary donors where they operate. Now, what we've then been doing is to really look at opportunities. Like everything else that we do, we had to really analyze things, be data-driven, look for things that are evidence-based. And so we could identify some areas where we thought, besides oil and gas, which would not last forever, we had to look at what the majority of the population could focus their attention on. Very small percentage, less than 1%, are involved in the oil and gas sector. The bulk of the opportunities are outside the oil and gas sector. And so we looked at that and we could identify things in the agriculture space, and especially certain value chains that we felt were the most promising, had the greatest potential for people to really tap into within the Delta. And that was around aquaculture, cassava, palm oil, poultry to an extent as well. And then we looked at supporting small and medium enterprises. And so what we focused on has been helping to improve productivity in those areas and to link actors within the ecosystem with each other to further boost their income, leverage investments into the Delta. We've been fortunate and successful that by our convening power, we're able to bring in other bilateral or multilateral agencies that hitherto did not operate in the Delta because the Delta was defined by conflict. And so the likes of the United States Agency for International Development and its UK equivalent, UK Aid, have been in the Delta and partnering with us. We've been on projects together and partnering in many respects. That has brought in a lot of additional investment into the Delta. But we are also mindful that you can have development without an enabling environment. So part of what we've been doing also is in the peace-building area. And what we've done is to facilitate the establishment of a network of individuals and groups who on their own traditionally were instrumental to fostering peace in their environment, and to support them with institutional capacity as well as personal capacity to be able to do what they traditionally were trying to do. And so that's called the Partners for Peace Network, and that organization has grown in the last 8 years to over 5,700 individuals and over 700 organizations that are there. Supporting them is a unit that we have, which we call the Integrated Peace Development Unit, that really focuses on data. So every incident within the Delta, we feed data into our database, and we have a map that we generate. We triangulate the information across different levels and other sources to make sure that we have what is possibly undisputedly, without any immodesty, most credible and most comprehensive data source on conflict issues within the Delta. So that's what we've been doing in that regard, and these folks have been going around getting involved in different forms of conflict, whether it's around militancy, cultism, communal issues, even the pastoralist versus issues.
So I can imagine that you're doing a lot of engagement with stakeholders.
Yes, we are.
So what has been the story so far with government and then the communities?
What started, the way we started is an admission, a humble admission that not one single entity can address the problems of the Niger Delta on its own. And so by our name, it's all about fostering partnerships across board. Public sector, private sector, or what you call the people's sector as well, all working together. I mentioned earlier partnerships with bilateral and multilateral agencies. Part of that is to come in and pool resources together, collaborate, and leverage each other's strengths. That has happened. Private sector has been made aware also of opportunities within the Delta. There were a lot of agro input companies selling fertilizers and chemicals that did not know anything about the Delta and were afraid to come in until folks like us started to broker their entry. Now they're doing business. What we do is different from some others. We don't insert ourselves. We adopt what is popularly called in the development world as the market systems approach. We go in there to facilitate such that when we pull out of an area, the primary actors who were doing things before, albeit not as productive as they should have been, now when they've been boosted, they continue to do it rather than the results collapsing just because an agency pulled out. So those are some of the things we've seen, whether it's with research agencies, whether it's with government, through advocacy or private sector or other development agencies or educational institutions. What we've seen is a willingness on everybody's part to pull their weight. We put in something, they put in their own sweat equity. But the challenges are humongous. And so more partnerships are needed, more resources to address.
And imagine the work that I set out for you, because I'm imagining the level of unemployment in that region and the need for job creation in that respect. Can you speak to some of your capacity building initiatives?
Okay, when we started, we had 4 programs. Economic development, which talks to the SMEs and the agricultural value chains that I mentioned earlier on, peace building, then capacity building, finally advocacy and analysis. Capacity building, we did not target individuals per se. We were looking at organizations, civil society organizations and business membership organizations. 8 years ago, most of these in the Delta were far behind counterparts in the rest of the nation. It was important as part of partnering with them to invest in building up their capacities so that they can do what they are set out to do, but do it better. Many of them have succeeded in that regard. In our economic development space, knowing that a typical entrepreneur is out there to make profit as well as create jobs, by helping them to do better what they were set out to do, we've created more jobs and we track those. But we don't just look at jobs alone. We look at funds leveraged, we look at investments that come in, and everything is built in with elements of sustainability to ensure that they can continue to go on. And so in the cassava space, we've seen quite a ton of that. In the aquaculture and palm oil areas, sectors also, we've seen that. But we also consult and partner with governments to look at the agriculture policies and job creation policies. We're working with the Delta State government on the job creation policy, Edo State on agri policy, Cross River State on a 30-year growth and development strategy, which is just being finalized. All of these have components of employment generation in there. And so what we do is bring our technical expertise to work with them to look at things. But most recently, because of our reputation, Ford Foundation approached us and we succeeded in partnering with them to come up with a youth employment pathways project that will be more focused on ensuring an accurate match between demand and supply within the labor force. What we've had in the past is that there's been a lot of emphasis on supply. So TVET, technical and vocational educational training programs all over the place. But a lot of youth were trained, but jobs did not come through for them. So some of them got frustrated and went back into militancy, or they sold the starter packs they were given and not that. So what we are trying to do differently is to work with employers so that you can match supply with demand, and then that is still in the early days, but when that succeeds, we're working with Ford, we're working with All On. All On is the Shell NGO, and then we're also talking to NDDC that has promised to also invest a substantial sum so that we can move this from 3 pilot states to other parts of the region.
I can imagine the work ahead of you, but I'm curious to know though, I can imagine the environment you met when you started is not the same that you're dealing with right now. So how has your strategy evolved over the years in engaging?
Well, the strategy that let me back up. Yes, things are different. 10 years ago, things were quite volatile. They've gotten a bit better due to a combination of factors. More awareness and increased investments in the Delta have helped to stabilize things. And of course, governments, past and present, have engaged stakeholders in some other respects. Also because there's been a paradigm shift with people realizing that the oil sector, as I mentioned earlier on, only hires less than 1%, that sector cannot address all the issues. And so with increasing focus on other non-oil sectors, things are changing gradually. And as others see their peers who are succeeding better than they were before in sectors like agric and SMEs, and also that is good peer endorsement. But as I said, all those good strides are still drops in the ocean compared to the size of the issues that you have within the Delta. So what we then did last year, and we have an annual forum where we bring in various stakeholders from all these sectors. Every year we try to focus. It's our signature event on advocacy to the most visible element of some of the things that are going on behind. So all the state governments brought together to say, we observed that there was a very huge gap around development planning. And so to bring all of them in, to focus on that, showcase a model that we felt they could benefit from, and provide them resources to begin to develop robust plans. So a number of them left there with strong and skeletons of plans that we'll be following up with them on this year, starting from another week or 2, to have them flesh out and begin to look at that. Part of the opportunity there then is that they'll be looking at not just going in their own individual silos, but to see how 2 or more states across the region can collaborate. That way they can maximize efficiencies and don't have to duplicate projects, because that's something we've observed within the Delta.
So I can imagine, so you are always on ground in the Niger Delta, you know, watching out, seeing how things play out and all that. I would like you to speak to the urgency, you know, in tackling some of the major issues you consider in that region.
Thank you. We are on ground. We have 2 offices in the Delta. We call them economic development centers. There's one in Warri and another one in Port Harcourt. There we demonstrate some of the things that we do, some of our projects, as well as the appropriate technologies that we are deploying that are helpful for catalyzing things within the Delta. So because of that also is where we have partners co-located with us and partnering with us, and members of the public can come in to come and speak with us, and we can collaborate in several respects. Because of that, we do have our hand on handle of things within the Delta. If there's something that creates urgency, that's one, the need for planning. It's been said in the past that the problem of the Delta is not the problem of money, because the Delta has witnessed a great influx of funds, but it's a problem of planning and execution properly. Things are well executed. We could have improved things, I dare say, with even less than what has been deployed. The second thing, so there's the need for a sense of urgency, to create a sense of urgency around the need for proper planning around development, which was why we had the Niger Delta Development Forum last year in Uyo. The second one is the issue around unemployment and underemployment. The numbers for the Delta are scary. They're higher than the national average. And if we don't do this, it will look like, if we don't address this squarely, and when I say we, all stakeholders, especially government stakeholders, put policies in place, have projects that target things and ensure a good match between labor supply and labor demand. If we don't do that, I think we're sitting on what's the proverbial time bomb within the Delta.
Speaking on your last point, which you just made now, on government, how have you guys, how do you guys put about checking government accountability with what they've said they're going to do and what they're actually doing on ground?
Well, one of the things we've done in our capacity building area, program area, is to undertake a couple of projects. But the one I would like to talk about, which is still ongoing because the previous one is ended, but one that's ongoing is one we call strengthening advocacy for civic engagement. It involves working with the United States Agency for International Development. It's a national thing that they have, but we are involved in the Niger Delta piece and we co-fund that. It's to invest in civil society organizations, all those NGOs, to really improve how to advocate about the issues of the Delta and how to follow up, to monitor government, to hold government entities more accountable. Now, there's varied levels of success across the different states. Some states are a little bit more accountable than others, but there's still room for opportunity in that regard. One of the things that we did with the Cross River State Growth and Development Strategy that I was talking about is that it was bottoms up. It was something that involves all sectors of the state, all various groups of stakeholders, right from the community level. When they launch that and it begins to show results, then we'll begin to see some changes in that regard. And that's what we're looking that all states will also emulate, especially if it can be backed by law, so that if there is a change in government, you can still ensure some continuity and sustainability. So governments are willing, but there are varying levels of success. There's more that some of them can do.
Looking at the subnational governments, I would like to know the level of support you are seeing from them. Also speak on the support from the international organizations and then the oil and gas community, the companies that play in that space.
We make our data available to whoever will be willing to use it. We don't sell it. We spend our money to do all these various things. The subnational agency that you focus on will be the NDDC, Niger Delta Development Commission. We have an MOU signed with them to support around strategy, some technical expertise. We have 2 resources embedded there to work with them. It's early days, it's gathering momentum, but we're already working on some things. Once they can sort out budget issues and they are better funded, we should see some of these things going on. So they are receptive, but it's still early days. We haven't gotten traction on a number of things, but the current management seems to have realized they need to do things differently, and that's why we're partnering with them to make those happen. We relate with the individual states. There is no subnational government per se, and unfortunately also the governors haven't come together in recent times as they tried to do in the past. That's a missed opportunity that it would be nice for them to look at. They have what is called a Braced Commission, 6 of the states there, especially those ones in the South region. That commission needs to be up and doing again because it has potentials to be able to change, and we partner with them, but things have been a bit of a lull. And so there's not too much going on right now. But those are some of the things that need to happen in that regard. But we partner with anybody and everybody out there, from local to state, as well as national development agencies like the NDDC, the Ministry of Niger, the Federal Ministry of Niger Delta, as well as the Office of the Vice President, where we were part of a team on the Niger Delta Way Forward.
What about the international organizations?
International agencies, as I mentioned, we partner with USAID. We co-fund projects. We were together in what is called Markets to Maximizing Agriculture in key targeted sites. We are also working on another phase of that together. As I mentioned, the SACE project is one that we're co-sponsoring, especially around the Delta. DFEED's project called MADE, Market Development Project, is co-located with us in our office, in our Economic Development Center in Port Harcourt. We share information, we collaborate, we partner together. We have a network called the Demand Alliance, which is made up of various donors. EU is also involved. They are all part of the Niger Delta Development Forum, and we meet at regular intervals to share information and look at how we can collaborate some more. So those are the things that are going on there. We know ourselves, COD Aid, Foster, CUSO, all of us, we all talk together. If we're either partnering in one state or across board.
And then the oil companies?
Well, as I told you, we were set up by Chevron Corporation. So we've been funded largely over the years by Chevron Corporation. We've got counterpart funding matching some of that fund, as well as we implement projects for some other people. Shell set up all on, fashioned after, similar to us, came on after us, just got fully operational in the last year or so. We all talk to each other. The issues in the Delta require that we should talk to each other. The more of them that can come along, the better.
I'd like you to speak on your work on SME development, how you're working with small businesses and helping them grow.
Okay, so under our economic development program, we have a market development project. That's the one that I mentioned earlier, looks at agricultural value chains on one side and what we call business linkages on the other side. And our business linkages program really just does a lot of diagnosis as part of capacity building of the various SMEs in the space. Where are they strong? Where are there opportunities for them to improve? And so we invest in developing them, training them, partnering with them to understand where the gaps and how they can grow. We help them in brokering linkages with other firms that can be off-takers of their services, of their products and things like that, and also that they can support vice versa. We have them all over the place. That's what we work with. It's part of that admission that not one entity can do it, and these guys are already there. So what we do is come in, help them understand what are the constraints, especially the systemic constraints in their way that have not allowed them, as at 8 years ago, to function at the level of their counterparts in maybe places like Lagos or other parts of the nation. So a number of them have come along in that regard, delivering better services. They themselves, service providers, are mentoring other SMEs and helping them to grow. And so you are having this replication across the region.